The world is watching a historic turning point unfold. Israel, once seen as the unshakable power of the Middle East, now finds itself on edge. Yemen, a nation long underestimated, has forced the global spotlight to shift. This is more than a conflict, it's a revolution of perception, a story of courage rewriting power itself. The question now isn't if change is coming, it's how far it will go. The Middle East is no stranger to power struggles, but what has unfolded in recent weeks has taken the world by surprise. Yemen, long portrayed as a nation battered by war and humanitarian crisis, has suddenly emerged as a force capable of shaking Israel's regional dominance. The shift has sent shockwaves through political and military circles alike. Analysts, journalists, and diplomats are all asking the same question. How did a nation once dismissed as too weak, too poor, and too fractured manage to disrupt one of the most advanced military powers in the region? The answer, it seems, lies in strategy, resilience, and timing, the very elements that define turning points in history. What Yemen has accomplished is not just a military maneuver, but a geopolitical statement. It has rewritten the rules of engagement by targeting key points of leverage, maritime routes, energy corridors, and psychological pressure points. Yemen has exposed vulnerabilities that Israel long believed were untouchable. This is not about brute strength. It is about strategic precision and the intelligent use of limited resources. Yemen's ability to transform asymmetrical warfare into a tool of influence marks a new era in Middle Eastern geopolitics. Suddenly, smaller nations are watching closely, realizing that power is no longer just about tanks, jets, or alliances, but about strategy, adaptability, and narrative control. Israel's panic is not born out of fear alone, but from disbelief. The long-standing assumption that military superiority guarantees regional dominance has been shattered. Yemen's rise as a credible threat challenges the psychological core of Israel's deterrence strategy, the idea that no one would dare confront it head on. Yet here stands Yemen, not only confronting, but influencing the direction of regional politics. The image of Israeli strength, once unshackable, now faces a test of credibility. The power optics have changed. The hunter suddenly feels watched by the hunted. The global reaction has been just as telling. Western media outlets are scrambling to analyze what they call a new Middle Eastern paradox, while regional broadcasters portray it as a long overdue reckoning. Social platforms are flooded with commentary, symbolism, and debate. Yemen's actions have transcended warfare. They have become a movement, a symbol of resistance, and a sign of shifting tides. In the court of global public opinion, perception often becomes power, and right now, Yemen controls the narrative. What began as a single act of defiance has transformed into a geopolitical shockwave, one that may permanently alter how power is measured in the Middle East. For the first time in decades, Israel finds itself under a level of strategic pressure it has not experienced since its founding. The aura of invincibility that once surrounded its military and intelligence networks is fading fast. What was once a predictable regional order, with Israel firmly in control of the narrative and the battlefield, is now slipping into uncertainty. Yemen's rise as a regional disruptor has forced Israel to confront vulnerabilities it never expected to expose. Behind the walls of high-level security meetings in Tel Aviv, urgency and unease dominate every conversation. It is not merely about military response anymore. It is about survival of image, influence, and authority in a region that suddenly seems less controllable. What makes this moment extraordinary is the precision of the challenge. Yemen hasn't tried to defeat Israel through traditional warfare. Instead, it has chosen the one battlefield Israel cannot easily dominate: strategic unpredictability. By disrupting Red Sea trade routes and challenging Israeli-linked shipping lines, Yemen has struck where it truly hurts the economy. Every delayed shipment, every rerouted vessel, every insurance increase represents more than just money. It represents uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds panic in the markets. For a nation that prides itself on its economic stability and global partnerships, Israel's sudden exposure to trade disruption has become a source of national anxiety. The ripple effect extends beyond borders, shaking investor confidence and questioning the security guarantees that Israel has long promised its allies. But the psychological impact is even greater. Israel's defense establishment, built on the premise of total deterrence, now faces a threat that does not follow conventional logic. Yemen's strategic moves, bold and unconventional, have bypassed traditional military confrontation and targeted perception itself. Every strike or disruption forces Israel to respond publicly, and every public response magnifies the appearance of vulnerability. This dynamic is what makes Yemen's pressure so powerful. It is not just about action, it's about forcing reaction. In global politics, the side forced to react is already losing control of the narrative. What's unfolding is more than a military standoff. It's a test of strategic composure. Israel's challenge now is to prove that its power is not just physical, but psychological, that its deterrence can still hold in an era where perception defines influence. Yemen's emergence as a calculated challenger has turned Israel's confidence into caution and its dominance into doubt. The world is watching closely, and for once, Israel's next move is not being made from a position of control, but of compulsion. The economic ripple effects of Yemen's actions are now echoing across the region, and their impact on Israel's financial and trade systems cannot be understated. What began as a series of tactical disruptions in the Red Sea has evolved into a full-scale economic stress test for Israel and its allies. Every nation depends on trade routes, but for Israel, maritime commerce through the Red Sea is not just important, it is vital. Yemen understood this perfectly. By threatening or obstructing these critical lanes, it has managed to strike at the core of Israel's economic stability without firing large-scale weapons. This strategy has turned shipping containers and oil tankers into silent instruments of pressure, forcing global investors and insurers to reevaluate the costs of doing business in the region. The immediate fallout is being felt in real numbers. Insurance premiums for Israeli-linked vessels have surged. Shipping companies are either rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks and millions of dollars in costs, or avoiding Israeli ports altogether. Each delay, each rerouting decision ripples through supply chains from consumer goods to energy imports. For Israel, a nation that thrives on global connectivity, this disruption has become more than a logistical issue. It's an economic vulnerability broadcast to the world. The markets have taken notice. Currency fluctuations, increased import costs, and investor hesitation are all symptoms of a deeper problem, the erosion of perceived stability, the one thing Israel has always depended on to attract foreign investment. Yet, beyond the spreadsheets and trade graphs lies something far more damaging, the psychological blow to investor confidence. Financial systems run on trust, and the moment that trust wavers, panic follows. Yemen's strategic pressure has created precisely that atmosphere, uncertainty. The question circulating among economic analysts is no longer whether Israel can defend itself militarily, but whether it can protect its trade routes and maintain investor confidence in an era of constant disruption. The global business community, watching from afar, is beginning to factor in geopolitical risk in ways it hasn't for decades when assessing Israeli assets. The most remarkable part of this story is how Yemen, without the financial muscle or technological infrastructure of a major economy, has managed to influence global markets through perception and precision. The symbolism is powerful that control over trade routes can sometimes outweigh control over territory. What Yemen has exposed is not just the fragility of Israel's economic defenses, but the growing reality that, in modern warfare, the battlefield is no longer limited to land and air. It stretches into boardrooms, trading floors, and the invisible networks of global commerce. And in this new arena, Yemen has proven it knows exactly where to strike. Behind the closed doors of Israel's political and military institutions, a quiet storm is building, one fueled by disbelief, frustration, and fear. The recent escalation involving Yemen has exposed cracks not just in Israel's defense strategy, but in its political foundation. For decades, Israel's leadership projected an image of unity and strength, a government capable of swift, decisive responses to any regional challenge. Yet now, the tone inside the corridors of power is far from confident. The phrase, Israel in panic, has moved from media sensationalism to a troubling reflection of reality. Ministers argue over strategy, intelligence agencies clash over priorities, and the once coordinated defense establishment appears shaken by a threat that refuses to fit into its traditional playbook. This psychological strain is unlike anything Israel has experienced in recent years. Yemen's actions have not only disrupted trade routes and military calculations, they've penetrated the Israeli psyche. The very idea that a smaller, war-torn nation could successfully challenge Israel's security apparatus has triggered a wave of introspection and anxiety. Inside Israeli society, citizens are asking questions that were once unthinkable. How could this happen? Where did the intelligence go wrong? And most importantly, has Israel lost its deterrence edge, the sense of control? The foundation of national confidence is slipping. That shift in public mood is what truly terrifies Israel's leadership. Once panic reaches the public sphere, it becomes harder to contain than any missile or drone. In the media, narratives of strength are now laced with caution. Analysts who once spoke confidently about Israel's technological and strategic superiority now discuss vulnerabilities and unknown variables. Even Israel's allies are watching carefully, offering diplomatic reassurances while quietly reassessing their own regional calculations. Every televised military briefing, every official statement carries the weight of trying to reassure a nation that no longer feels untouchable. Yemen's success lies not only in its ability to disrupt, but in its capacity to instill doubt. Doubt in Israel's leaders, in its intelligence systems, and in its long-standing belief that deterrence alone ensures safety. Panic in the political heart of a nation can be more destabilizing than any external strike. For Israel, this moment is more than a strategic setback. It is a crisis of confidence. The government's struggle to project composure while managing internal disarray reveals a truth that many in Tel Aviv are reluctant to admit. That power, once questioned from within, becomes increasingly difficult to restore. Across the Middle East, from the crowded streets of Cairo to the echoing alleys of Beirut and the bustling markets of Amman, a new sense of inspiration is spreading, and it comes from an unlikely source. Yemen, long viewed through the lens of struggle and survival, has suddenly become a symbol of defiance, a voice that challenges decades of political hierarchy and regional imbalance. The story of a nation once dismissed as powerless now resonates like a rallying cry for millions who have lived under the shadow of domination. What Yemen has accomplished is more than a strategic victory. It is an emotional and ideological breakthrough that has reignited the idea that resistance, when rooted in purpose, can shake even the mightiest of powers. The images and headlines have turned into symbols of pride and possibility. Social media feeds across the Arab world are flooded with messages celebrating Yemen's audacity, praising its resilience, and framing its actions as a moment of regional awakening. In coffee houses, on news panels, and in university debates, the conversation has shifted from fear of power to admiration for courage. The narrative is no longer just about missiles and blockades. It's about reclaiming dignity. Yemen's defiance has reminded the region that even the most marginalized nations can stand up to those who claim invincibility. That message has emotional gravity, and it is rapidly reshaping public sentiment far beyond the battlefield. This wave of inspiration is not lost on regional governments. Many are watching uneasily as Yemen's rise as a symbol of defiance fuels new discussions about sovereignty and self-determination. In a region where alliances are often built on caution and compromise, Yemen's boldness is rewriting the rules of engagement. It is demonstrating that power can emerge not from wealth or technology, but from conviction. For ordinary people, especially in nations that have long felt overlooked or constrained, Yemen's actions are more than news. They are proof that courage can shift the balance of perception. The psychological effect is undeniable. Where fear once dominated regional thinking, pride is taking root. Yemen has transformed its struggle into a story of empowerment that resonates with the collective memory of resistance across the Arab world. In doing so, it has achieved something far more powerful than a tactical victory. It has ignited belief. Belief that the era of one-sided dominance is fading and that even the smallest nations, when united by purpose, can become the spark that changes the course of history. Political analysts across the globe are now converging on one striking conclusion. Israel's dominance in the Middle East is no longer unquestioned. For decades, Israel stood as a symbol of control and certainty, a nation whose military and intelligence capabilities made it seem untouchable. Yet the recent escalation involving Yemen has shattered that illusion. The tremors from this confrontation are not limited to military calculations. They are intellectual, psychological, and ideological. The once stable hierarchy of power in the region has begun to tilt, and that shift is sparking conversations from Washington to Riyadh about what the next phase of Middle Eastern politics will look like. The most remarkable element of this transformation is how swiftly it has unfolded. In a matter of months, Yemen, a country that has endured years of internal conflict and foreign intervention, has forced the world to reconsider its understanding of power dynamics in the region. The traditional equation where technology and Western alliances equal dominance no longer seems absolute. Yemen's rise demonstrates that determination, strategy, and a deep sense of purpose can disrupt even the most fortified systems. For Israel, this represents not only a strategic challenge, but a historical reckoning. The notion of uncontested supremacy, once used to shape both policy and propaganda, now stands on fragile ground. Global think tanks and defense experts are beginning to articulate what was once unthinkable, that Israel's deterrence model may be outdated in an age of asymmetric warfare. The methods that once guaranteed control, surveillance, rapid strikes, and intelligence superiority, are proving less effective against unconventional actors who thrive on unpredictability. Yemen's approach, rooted in psychological and symbolic impact, has undermined the traditional logic of war and power. It has turned every act of resistance into a media narrative, every disruption into a message that reverberates far beyond the battlefield. Perhaps the most profound shift is in perception. Across the Arab world, Israel is no longer seen as an immovable power, but as a nation that can be challenged and pressured. The regional response is evolving from silent compliance to cautious optimism about change. Even Western analysts, typically aligned with Israel's strategic position, are acknowledging a fundamental truth. The balance of power is no longer fixed. Yemen's actions have exposed a vulnerability that can't be measured in weapons or wealth. It's the vulnerability of overconfidence. For the first time in modern history, Israel is being forced to confront a new reality, one where fear no longer flows in only one direction.